Good morning. Good morning, Ben. Okay, so we have the sugya, the discussion here of the laws of tuma and tahara, of purity and impurity. And it sounds harder than it is. It's not. It's not really that hard. I'm going to try to go through it today. It deals with the facts, the rules of Tumah and Tahara that pretty much are the common rules that come up again and again in the Gemara. That there is a concept of an avatuma, something that imparts tuma to other things. It's the source of tuma. And then you have the recipients of tuma, and there are different levels of being a recipient. The first degree is the one that receives the tuma, is called a rishon. He's the first. Then if he touches something else, it's called a sheni. It's the second level of tuma. And then when it comes to truma, it could actually, a second level of tuma can actually cause there to be a third level of tuma for something that's holy, like truma. And then for something that's kodshim, could even be a fourth level. So that's not so applicable here. The main thing that we need to know is the concept of having a first degree recipient and being a second degree recipient. And when it comes to regular produce, there is no third degree recipient. It's only regarding truma, at least on a simple level. There is no such thing. Once it's a level 2, it can't cause something else to become tummy, to become impure. So what that means is that it continuously gets weaker. So in other words, the avatuma, the source of tuma, makes a first degree recipient. And that recipient can then make a second level of tuma, but it's called a second level. It's not, doesn't have the same status as the first. It's weaker. And that second level actually cannot make a third level of tuma. So in other words, if something else touches the second level of tuma, of recipient tuma, it cannot cause that other thing to become a third level. Now, the easiest thing to make tameh is food and drinks. To make a person tameh and to make a vessel tameh is harder. It's generally will not. Recipients can't make a person tameh or a vessel tameh. Generally, it's only the avatuma, the source of tuma, can make other items like a person or a vessel tameh. But causing food to become tummy and drink to become tummy, that is easier on a biblical level. To make food and drink tummy, that's very simple. So in other words, a first degree recipient of tuma, he's called a rishon. What would that cause to become tameh? If that food, let's say, touches some other food, that other food would then become a second degree recipient of tuma, of impurity. So this is just to give you the little brush up of what we learned yesterday. And we also learned yesterday that the rabbis made numerous decrees upon this biblical rules. And the rabbinic decrees that they made, one of them was that liquid, if liquid becomes impure, it actually will, like for example, a drink becomes impure, it would actually, even if it gets impure from a second degree recipient tuma, it becomes a first degree. It's a little shocking that it could go back a level, but that's the way it works. And so two things are shocking about it. One is that a second degree normally can't do anything to any other item because the second degree is where it ends. There's no further tuma. And here we're seeing a second degree tuma can actually make a drink tameh. That's the first shocking thing. The second shocking thing is that it can not only make it tameh, but it does, and it not only makes it a second level of impurity, it makes it a first level. So it goes back a level. So that's a important rule that we're seeing here on a rabbinic level. It can make the liquid the liquid becomes a first degree recipient tumah called a rishon. Another surprising thing that the rabbis added was that liquid can actually make a vessel impure, can actually make the outside of a vessel impure if it touches it, because the liquid is considered a rishon and on a rabbinic level. And the rabbi said that will have the ability to we're going to give a special rule, even though normally a vessel will not become impure, even from a rishon, even from a first degree, it can't get impure. But a liquid will have the ability on a rabbinic level to make a vessel, the outside of the vessel, impure. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say, when you say tuma, is it just when you touch a dead person or dead body, or is it also for health reasons like viruses and so forth, transferring?
Only for spiritual impurity. Not only a dead body, there are other impurities besides a dead body, but it's only for spiritual purposes.
But not health issues.
Hygiene. No hygiene and no health. This is called tumah. Biblical or rabbinic tumah, which is not connected to that.
But ziva was mentioned, and that is a health issue.
No, zav and zava are not considered impure because of the health element of it. They're impure because of the spiritual dimension that is involved. It's a spiritual impurity. Although you could say there is some type of like a leprosy, tsaras is tame, right? But it seems like a health issue, but we're not dealing with the health element of it. We're dealing with the spiritual element of it, and it's not the same as what doctors call leprosy.
Because I wanted to say, if it's a health thing, then transferring back from second degree to fourth degree is normal. Because if you are touching something and then 2 days later you are sick, so then you are number one, back to number one.
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, it doesn't. It wouldn't apply here. But
I wanted to clarify it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Okay, so we're dealing with spiritual impurity called tumah. And tumah used to be a very popular thing that all Jewish people had to be concerned about, because everyone, had farms and they would separate truma, and they had to be careful not to make it impure. And the same thing applied to challah. When women baked bread, or anyone baked bread, they had to be careful that the challah did not become impure. Nowadays, we're not concerned because everyone is impure anyway, and we don't give it to the kohen, doesn't eat it. But the concept of purity and impurity used to be a very serious thing, because one of the biggest concerns was if someone became tameh and then caused holy things to become tameh, or entered the Beis Hamikdash. That was a very serious concern, of entering the Beis Hamikdash or causing holy things to become impure. So Kohanim had to be extra. Of course, they had to be overly careful about these things. But even Israelites had to be careful. They had to know if they were tameh or not tameh, and they shouldn't end up causing any holy thing to become impure, or causing a kohen to be impure. Okay, so the Gemara that we learned, I'm just going to go over it outside. We mentioned a law in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah said that when it comes to having wine before a meal, so the custom was they would drink wine, besides for Shabbos, even if it's not Shabbos, they used to have a custom to have wine and then have a meal and then have their big meal. And the question was, should they wash their hands for bread before they drink the wine? Or should they wash their hands for bread after they drink the wine. If they wash their hands before drinking the wine, that means that they would have some type of a interruption between the washing of the hands and the bread. And if they wash their hands after they drink the wine, it will be a less of an interruption between washing the hands and the bread. But seemingly, Beis Shammai is not concerned about the interruption. And Beis Shammai says, you know what? It's best to wash. You have to wash your hands. According to Beis Shammai, you wash your hands before drinking the wine. And then you drink the wine. You say the bracha, of course, on the wine, drink the wine. And then you can sit down to your, then you could have your bread, your meal. And according to Beis Hillel, you should really drink the wine first and then wash your hands and have bread. And the Gemara tries to understand what's the reason of this. And the Gemara explains that it has to do with purity and impurity. What does this mean? Well, what happens when you wash your hands first is your hands now will become purified. Person's hands are considered a level 2 of tumah. Yodayim are called shniyos. They're called second-degree recipients of tumah, the hands. It's another rabbinic decree that hands are always tameh. And in order to purify them from this second degree of impurity, they do not need to go to a mikvah. The hands that are tameh all you need to do is wash like we do for bread. That's how you wash for to get rid of this rabbinic level of tumah that is on the hands, called shniyos. Yodayim are called shniyos. The hands are called second-degree recipients tumah. You need to wash the hands. So Beis Shammai wants you to wash your hands first, and then you can pour the wine and hold the cup of the wine. And the reason is, Beis Shammai says, because if you're going to first pour the wine, what's going to happen is the liquid that's on the outside of the cup of the wine is going to become impure, because your hands are called second-degree impurity. And second-degree impurity, what's the rabbinic law? If it touches liquid, it makes the liquid into a first-degree recipient of tumah. And what's going to happen then? The liquid on the outside of the cup is now going to become a first-degree recipient of tumah. Why? Because it touched your hands. And now it's going to go and make the cup. It's going to cause the cup to be impure. So the cup will be impure, and Beis Shammai is very concerned about that. You're not allowed to drink from an impure cup, according to Beis Shammai. And therefore they said, you know what? Wash your hands first. If you wash your hands first, and then you touch the cup that's wet, what's going to happen? Nothing. You're pure. Your hands are pure because you washed already. You touched the wet cup, and the cup is pure because you're not allowed to drink from an impure cup. And so therefore, what ends up happening is you are touching some wet liquid that's on the outside of a cup, and there's no impurity there. However, if you would touch the cup, the wet cup, before washing your hands, in other words, if you start pouring and only afterwards you're going to wash your hands are second-degree recipient of tumah. And because of that, they would end up causing the wine, the liquid on the outside of the cup, to be impure. And that liquid would then cause the cup to become impure. And that would be problematic. And because of that, Beis Shammai says, wash your hands before you pour the wine. And the Gemara says, what about if your hands touch the cup? What would happen if you didn't have liquid on the outside of the cup and your hands touch the cup? Would they also cause the cup to be impure? In other words, are we only concerned that there's liquid on the outside of the cup, or is Beis Shammai also concerned if there is no liquid on the outside of the cup, then your hands that are considered second-degree recipient of tumah, that those hands, could they cause the cup to become impure? And the Gemara says, no, they can't, because they're a second degree. And can a second degree make something into a third degree? No. The only way it could do that is this special rabbinic exception to the rule, which is that liquids could become a recipient of tumah, even from a second degree tumah, and they even become a first degree. This shocking rule of the laws of liquids that doesn't fit the normal rules that we're used to. It actually makes the liquid into a first degree recipient of tumah, and that will cause the cup to become impure. Yes, Robert.
I guess I'm trying to decipher through all of this, and I think part of what's affecting me is that it's the health issue. And from second to first, because you don't wash your hands, or then you don't touch the cup, or you touch the cup, then the cup itself and the wine then becomes tumah. So to me, it's, I guess, the question of hygienics, because you're transferring, again, a disease without cleaning the cup, by washing your hands, cleaning the cup, and then drinking the wine. So I'm just trying to decipher through all of that.
So Ben had mentioned this thought that maybe it has something to do with disease. Correct. And I explained to him that it actually is not a hygienic issue, and it's not anything to do with some disease. The law of tumah applies to very healthy people, some of the strongest people and healthy people, and people who diet and jog, and they could be very healthy. They could become tameh, impure. So it has nothing to do with any disease on them. It is fully a spiritual issue that we're dealing with. It might be easy to relate to if you think of some health issue, but that's not what we're not dealing with, the contamination causing someone else to be impure.
Right. So it's a spiritual ritual process we're dealing with. Yeah.
Right. And that's why the biggest issue, the biggest problem would be that someone would go and make the Beis Hamikdash impure. And that would not be a health issue. That would be, again, it would be a desecrating, it would be a spiritual desecration of the Beis Hamikdash.
Thank you.
So, so we just now finished Beis Shammai's explanation, and now we jump to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says you should not wash your hands first before you pour the wine. And what was the reason of Beis Hillel? So the reason of Beis Hillel was that what's going to happen if you pour the wine first, if you end up pouring the wine first, washing your hands first, excuse me. If you do that, then your hands might be a little wet. Why? So we explained yesterday, your hands might be wet because the law of drying your hands is more of a law that you don't want to eat bread with wet hands. There is such a law. But when you're drinking a cup of wine, you might not be so careful to dry your hands perfectly. So your hands might be wet. After you wash your hands will be wet. Now, according to Beis Hillel, the cup that you're drinking from could be an impure cup. You're allowed to have the outside of the cup could be impure, according to Beis Hillel. And because of that, Beis Hillel has to be concerned that you might end up receiving tumah, impurity, from the cup. How would you get tummy from the cup? Because your hands are a little wet, and you're going to touch the cup, and the cup they're not worried is wet, but they're worried your hands are wet. And the cup is tameh, might be impure, because according to Beis Hillel, you're allowed to have an impure cup. So then your hands will now become tameh. And guess what? The whole purpose of washing hands is so that your hands are pure and they're not level 2 of tumah. What happens if they touch the cup that's impure and the hands are wet? You're going to go back to your impurity that was originally on your hands. You're now going to have, your hands are going to be a level 2 of impurity because they touched the wet cup. The wet cup is a level 1 of impurity, and that will touch the hands. That now the hands will now be a level 2 of impurity, and you will need to wash your hands again. So you gain 0 from washing your hands at the beginning. On the contrary, you ruined the washing of your hands at first. So don't wash your hands. What's going to happen if you don't wash your hands? You will have dry hands. You will touch the cup, which Beis Hillel says they don't think that there's any reason to assume it'll be a wet cup. It'll probably be a dry cup. So therefore, you have dry hands that are impure. They're called level 2. They're going to touch a cup that's impure because Beis Hillel says you can use an impure cup. And there's no problem here because the wine inside the cup is not going to catch the impurity. It's not contagious because the wine inside the cup is pure and your hands are not going to touch it. So you have no problem. And then afterwards, you'll wash your hands for bread and you'll dry your hands. And if you wash your hands for bread and dry them, now you're all set. There is no issue of your hands becoming impure again. Now, you may ask, what about during the meal? Maybe your hands are going to have some liquid from the food on your hands. And especially if you have chicken wings or something that makes your hands, spare ribs, make your hands a little wet, they'll get, moisture from the meat and the fat. And so you may ask, well, during the meal, you're going to create a big problem because your cup is impure. According to Beis Hillel, you're allowed to use a cup that the outside is impure. And you're going to have this liquid, this moisture on your hands. It's going to touch the cup. Well, what's going to happen? Your hands might become impure, right? Sounds like a very strong question. Your hands will become impure. The answer is no. Liquid from food is not an issue. That's not considered a liquid. It's the liquid that we're concerned about is wine or water or some other liquids that would apply, but it wouldn't apply to the liquid that's on your hands. So basically, we now understand Beis Hillel's view of why you should wash your hands after the wine instead of before the wine. And Beis Hillel asks, maybe touching your hands to the cup of wine, even without the liquid, will now cause your hands to become impure. Beis Shammai says, no, that wouldn't be an issue because if there was no liquid, the cup that's impure would not cause a person to become impure. It's only if there's some liquid in the middle that would create the problem. Now, the Gemara says, what about the liquid inside the cup? And that's where we are up to. If you have a cup that's impure, the outside of is impure, it would seem that should cause the liquid that's in the cup also to become impure. So let me tell you where we are in the Gemara. We are just 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So
Ein is 3 lines up.
So the ein kli metame adam, it says a kli is not going to make a person tame. Yeah, so it's the last word on the third line up. Thank you, Ben. The last word on the third line up. According to Beis Hillel, you're allowed to use a cup that's impure. So the question is, it would seem that the liquid inside the cup will become tameh from the cup. The cup, which we said is a 2nd degree tumah. And what are you gaining by your whole thing about not becoming tameh, not letting your hands become tameh? if you end up drinking this liquid, that's this drink that's in the cup, it's which is tameh. And the Gemara says that here we're talking about a vessel, that the vessel is not completely impure. It actually became impure because of liquid. So it's not that the vessel became impure because it touched the source of impurity, which would make the whole vessel impure. We're talking about a case where liquid caused the vessel to become impure. Where the outside is what's tummy. The inside, toichai, is tahar, is pure. It's the outside that has this level of spiritual impurity. And ditnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, kli shenitma chayr b'mashkin, a vessel that the outside is impure from liquid, a chayr of tamein, the outside is tamei, and therefore the liquid that's inside the cup is not going to be the inside is not going to be impure, and it is not going to be impure. And you can turn the page now, 52b. Toichai, what's in it? Va'oignai, and the lip of the cup. The lip of when the cup, the top of the cup folds over to the outside is called the oignai, the lip. So va'oznai, and the round handle, the yadav, and the long handle. All of these things are tahirin. They are actually pure. They are not the they do not receive impurity from the liquid. The liquid causes the outside to be impure, but the inside stays pure, and therefore we are not worried about the wine that's in this cup. We're worried about the outside of the cup. Possibly, if your hands are wet, could cause they're wet with water. They could cause them to become, cause the hands to become impure. Okay, so the Mishnah continues there, and it says nitma toichai nitma kulai. The Mishnah continues with one more point, and it says that if the inside would become tameh with liquid, then the entire cup would be tameh. But the reason why only the outside is tameh is because the liquid touched the outside. If the liquid had touched the inside, that would have been a problem. But the liquid touched the outside of the cup, and therefore the liquid was tameh. It's called liquid always is a first degree tumah. We explained that earlier, that rabbinic level, on a rabbinic level, the liquid becomes on a first degree tumah. Even if it receives it from a second degree recipient, it becomes a first degree recipient of tumah, and it then transmits tumah to either the outside of the cup if it touches the outside, or if it touches the inside of the cup, the entire cup becomes tameh. And again, this is all on a rabbinic level, not on a biblical level. So the Gemara asks the Maikom Miflagi, so what is the bottom line? What does it boil down to? Where is the source of this argument? What is it? Where does this originate, actually? Where does the argument originate from? Beis Shammai Savri, Beis Shammai holds, Asur lehishtamesh b'chli, Beis Shammai holds you're not allowed to use a cup that nidmu achayrav b'mashkin, that the outside of the cup is impure. So if Beis Shammai is never worried that the cup is going to cause you to be impure, because he holds you're not allowed to use an impure cup that the outside is impure. And the Gzeira is Mishum Nitzaitzitz. The Gzeira, the reason for that is that he's nervous. Some of the liquid from the cup will spill over, spritz out onto the outside of the cup, and it'll end up causing problems, because the cup will then cause the liquid. The cup will now have liquid on the outside of it, and it'll cause that liquid that's on the outside of it to become a rishon, a first degree tumah. And then when you touch it, your hands will become tameh, and you'll end up eating bread with hands that are not considered washed for hamaitzi. So again, the reason we wash for hamaitzi, why do we wash for bread? We wash for bread to get this impurity, this second degree impurity that our hands have, to get it off our hands. Now, if our hands end up getting wet with this cup that's impure during the meal, so then you would defeat the purpose, because it would end up that your hands will now become impure, a second degree impurity. So even though you washed them before the meal, now during the meal, they became impure again. And Beis Shammai is concerned about that. Now, Veleka lemigzar shema yitmu hamashkin shebiyadayim bakois. And according to Beis Shammai, there's no worry. There's no reason to make a decree to be concerned that maybe your hands will cause the liquid maybe the liquid that's on your hands will become impure from the cup. There's no worry, because you can't use a cup that's impure. So we're not worried like Beis Hillel is worried that your hands that are wet might get impure from the liquid on your hands from the cup. We're not worried about that because the cup is not allowed to be an impure cup according to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel Savri, and now we have the Beis Hillel view. Beis Hillel holds that, and we are 5 lines from the top of the page, 52b. Beis Hillel Savri, Beis Hillel holds, mutter le'ishtamesh b'kli, you're allowed to use a vessel, shenit ma'acher b'mashkin, that the outside is impure through liquids, it became impure. You're allowed to use such a cup because Beis Shammai says during the meal it's going to be dry. Omri nitzaitzis lo'ishtichi. They say that it's not common that there's going to be liquid spritzing from your cup onto the outside of the cup. And so what is the concern? If you're not worried about any drops, any cause, the cup is not going to become the cup is not going to cause liquid on the outside of the cup to become impure, because there's no liquid that's going on the outside of the cup. There's no spritzing it's not going to spill over. And so there is concern. Shema yatamu mashkin shebiyodayim machmas hakois, that maybe the liquid that's on your hands, in other words, from washing your hands, that we would be concerned, and therefore don't wash your hands before. Do not wash your hands before you pour and drink the wine. Okay. Then the Brisa says one more point. Another 6 words. Davar acher. Another explanation why you should not wash your hands before pouring the wine. What do you think the next explanation is? We touched upon it earlier. Why should you not wash your hands before pouring the wine and then having hamoitzi later? Yes, Ben?
Because Hillel says you have to wash before you eat.
Right. You don't want to interrupt
the
bread, the washing the hands from the bread. You don't want to make an interruption. So here he says, Davar acher, Beis Hillel says, also, another point, another reason, Takef lenatilas yodayim su'uda. Immediately after washing your hands, you should eat the meal. So don't go and drink wine, pour wine and drink it in the middle. Instead, you should immediately eat the meal after washing your hands. So this would seemingly be it would have a practical application. You know, some people, they wash their hands before the hamoitzi. They sit back down and they get bored. So they see they have a little wine in their cup. Let's go drink some of the wine. Let's go, or they start talking. No, Netekef Netilas Yadayim Su'uda, you should not interrupt between washing the hands and the meal. And you should really have your meal right away. And you shouldn't interrupt with talking, with drinking, with other things. It should be as soon as possible after the washing, you should have your meal. Shulchan Aruch has brought down that ideally you shouldn't have the interruption of 22 steps. There is such a measurement that's the ideal, not to interrupt with such a length of time. So take I should mention. Oh, I forgot to mention that our learning today. David is in the hospital. David Olensky, and we're going to have him in mind for refuah shlema. David Michael Ben Esther. You should have a refuah shlema.
Amen.
Okay, so Beis Hillel says. So I'm sorry, Davar Acher, right? Beis Hillel says that there's another reason why you should not wash before you pour the wine. It's because tekev lenatilas yadayim suuda, immediately after washing your hands, you should have the meal, meaning the bread, and not interrupt with drinking the wine or pouring the wine and so on. The Gemara asks, my davar acher, why does Beis Hillel need another reason, or what's the meaning of this extra reason? Hachi ka'amri lahu, the Gemara answers, this is what Beis Hillel is saying. Hachi ka'amri lahu Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. This is what Beis Hillel is telling Beis Shammai. L'didchu di'amrisu, according to you that you say, asur lehishtamesh b'kli, you're not allowed to use a vessel, she'achayrav tmeyin, that the outside is impure, the gazrinan mishum nitzotzitz, you're concerned about some droplings, I guess, of the liquid. Droplets, excuse me. Thank you. The droplets of the liquid will go on the outside of the cup. Afilu hachi, nevertheless, Beis Hillel says, you have an interesting point there. We don't agree with you, but your point, you have a point. Afilu hachi, but nevertheless, ho adifa, this is more, better. This is better because there's another point that has to be mentioned, and our way is better to do it our way, to take of Natilas Yadayim Suuda, because right after the washing of the hands, you should have the meal. So this is the conclusion of this piece of the Gemara. And the next Gemara, I must say, is not going to go to a different discussion. It actually continues one more Gemara with this laws of purity and impurity. So let's do the next piece of Gemara as well. Beis Shammai Yoimrim, Beis Shammai says mekaneach. So the previous Gemara, we concluded that we have a Beis Shammai opinion, Beis Hillel, about how to wash your hands, and it has to do with level of with laws of purity and impurity, and both of them are trying to cover yourself from getting impure. We don't want you to get impure. We don't want items to get impure. We don't want to spread impurity, and so they're trying to cover themselves and figure out how to do it in the best way possible. And that was the and then the Gemara mentioned, the Beis Hillel mentioned one other point was that it's also important to know that you should wash your hands right before you have the meal and not so much earlier, like before you pour the wine and so on. So that was the previous Gemara. Now the Gemara says another statement in the Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? So the Mishnah said that where do you leave the napkin? There was an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about where to put the napkin. Beis Shammai says you wipe your hands on the napkin and put it on the table. Beis Hillel said you put it on the cushion that you're sitting on. So what is the reason behind this argument? Putting a napkin on the table or putting a napkin on the cushion? The Gemara says, you know what? This is also connected to the laws of purity and impurity. So Beis Shammai Yomer Mekaneach Chulu. So we're now at the two dots. Beis Shammai says you wipe your hands on this napkin, and then you put it on the table. Beis Hillel says, put it on the cushion. Tanu Rabbanan. So we learned in a brisa, this is also a Tosefta, and Beis Shammai says that Mekanech Yada B'mapa, you wipe your hands on this little this napkin, or sort of like a towelette, and we're talking about after you washed your hands for bread, you wipe them on this towel, this napkin, and umanicha ala shulchan, and put it then on the table. And they're specifically saying don't put it on the cushion. She'imato eimer ala kesses, because if you would say to put it on the cushion, gzeira, we are concerned, shema, maybe, if this the napkin is wet, what's going to happen? Yitamu mashkin sheba mapa machmas hakeses. Maybe if the cushion is impure, what's going to happen? The liquid that's in this mappa, that's in this napkin, is going to become impure because the cushion is impure, right? A cushion could be impure. It'll cause the liquid to become what level of impurity? Well, we know that liquid always becomes a level 1 recipient. So we're worried that the liquid in the napkin will become impure and it'll become a level 1 impurity. And what's going to happen? When you end up wiping your hands during the meal, it ends up that your hands are going to become impure, and they'll become level 2 because the liquid is level 1. So your hands will become a level 2. And what's going to happen? You're going to end up eating bread with a level 2 of impurity, and it's as if you didn't wash your hands before eating bread. That's basically what the problem is. So Beis Shammai says,
what's the cassette? I don't understand.
You're sitting on some type of a chair, cushion, whatever you want to call it. So,
yeah, but you're sitting on it. How do you put your napkin on it?
So the thing is, it was wide. It was like
think of a recliner. Reclining.
Used, as opposed to the table, it's a
Back
used
in those
napkin. Where do you
I
twist
think they sat on sofas, not on chairs.
So that's it. So that you
They
answered your
reclined
question.
on a sofa.
That's it. That's right. Thank you, Ezra and Ben, Isaac. They reclined on a sofa. So you put your napkin. You might think to put it on your cushion. Instead, it says no. Put it on the table. And the reason is because the cushion, it seems that Beis Shammai allows you to have a cushion that's impure, and you're allowed to sit on an impure cushion. And he's worried if you end up doing that, you might end up if you put your napkin on it, it might end up that the napkin is extra wet. It'll end up absorbing the impurity from the cushion. It will receive impurity from the cushion, and it'll be considered a level 1 impurity. That liquid will then touch your hands will touch that liquid. Your hands will now become a level 2 hands, and it'll be like you're eating bread without washing hametz. Now, so therefore, put it on the table. Now, the table has to be pure. So we're not worried about the table because any issue with the table. According to Beis Shammai, you're not allowed to use an impure table. So we're worried about the cushion. We're not worried about the table. Now, the Gemara says, "V'netamye keses lamapa." Maybe the cushion will make the napkin impure even without the liquid. Who cares if the liquid is impure? Maybe it should. If the cushion is impure, it'll make the napkin impure. No, the Gemara says, no, that's not an issue. Ein kli matame kli. A vessel, if it's not a source of impurity, it cannot, if it's not an avhatoma, a source of impurity, it's only a recipient, it cannot make another vessel impure. And therefore, we're not worried at all about making the napkin impure unless the napkin is wet. Unatamye keses legavra gufe. Maybe the cushion should make the person impure when he's sitting on it. And then you have a much bigger issue. The person is now going to be impure. So forget about the whole napkin business. The person himself will be impure. So Gemara answers that ein kli matame adam. Another rule about Tumah and Tahara, that a vessel does not, if it's not a source of impurity, it can't make a person impure. So we are not worried at all about sitting on a impure cushion. That's not a problem.
Rabbi, isn't that not so? I mean,
So
if you
there is
sit
a
on
question-
something that's tameh,
Uh-huh.
you should become tameh.
So Ezra is asking a question there is a strong question that could be asked over here, and that is that on certain tumas, there are certain tumas, they're called that you
Drisa.
the seating would there's the Moshav and Mishkov, and the Moshav and Mishkov, and they in Merkov, there are three very severe types of tumas where something you sit on becomes an av hatuma, becomes a source of impurity. But the thing is that so if a zav, for example, a zav sits on them, that would create very serious impurity. So you would want to be very careful from those, not to sit on them. The only thing is that those type of impurities, people were extra careful from. We're never worried of sitting on a zav chair. You're not worried about. What you are worried about is sitting on a second degree, a first degree impurity of a chair, not a zav. In other words, that was something that people separated from. Whenever there was a zav, it was like he had a sign on his head. I'm a zav, don't get near me. You know what I mean? You were extra careful when someone was impure like that. And anything they sat on, the Department of Health sent calls and called everyone and said, oh, were you in contact with this? Oh, did this person come to your house? Like the Kayanim had a whole phone system, they would keep track of things. They tracked down Zavs and issues like that. So they would have been extra careful from such a thing, and we're not worried about that. We are worried, however, about the rabbinic type of impurity. The liquid touched the couch. Someone came to our house and he didn't wash his hands. Touched liquid. The liquid spilled. Things like that. That's what they were concerned about. These are not severe types of impurity, but they are an issue for a kohen who wants to eat truma, and therefore Beis Shammai wants to make sure that you don't get impure. Your hands don't get impure from this cushion. And so therefore you can sit on the cushion. We're not worried. The cushion, we're not worried the cushion is going to be wet and you're not going to sit on a wet cushion. But we are worried that if your napkin that you dried your hands from washing your hands, that you dried, that could actually become tameh, and that would make your hands tameh, because you can use that napkin to wipe your hands after you have your spare ribs or whatever. And therefore you would want to make sure not to put the napkin on your cushion. Instead, you put it on the table. And the table is not allowed to be tameh. You're not allowed to eat on a tameh table according to Beis Shammai, and therefore you're all covered. And now we go to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel oimrim ala keses. Beis Hillel says that you put the napkin on the cushion, and the exact opposite of Beis Shammai. And why? If you put it on the shulchan, on the table, gzeira, we're concerned that maybe the table will be impure, because Beis Shammai holds you are allowed to sit at an impure table, a table that's a second degree recipient of tumah, and therefore Beis Shammai has to be careful about the table, and that maybe Shema Yitamu Mashkin Sheba Mapa Machmas Shulchan. Maybe the table will be a second degree tumah. It'll cause the napkin liquid, the liquid in the napkin, to become now a first degree impurity, as we know that the second degree has the ability to cause something to be a first degree recipient if it's liquid, and so it'll make the liquid in the napkin tummy. It'll then go back and make it'll end up causing the food to be tameh, and the food will become a second degree tumah. So in other words, the food on the table will now become tameh, because the liquid is there on the table, and it's on the table because your napkin is on the table, and maybe this liquid will then cause the food to be tameh. Why will it be tameh? Because the liquid is a level 1 tumah, and the food is going to now be a level 2 of tumah. The Gemara says, why doesn't the table automatically, since we're worried about a table that's tameh, isn't the table automatically causing the food to be tameh? So the Gemara says, because it's the table is a level 2 of recipient of tumah. We're talking about a level 2 of recipient of tumah. And the level 2 can't make a level 3 when it comes to chulin, regular unconsecrated food. It doesn't cause there to be, it stops there. You can't go further when it's a level 2, only if it's a liquid. Ella al yedei mashkin, only through liquid. Liquid could be a recipient, could receive impurity from a level 2, and it actually makes it it becomes a level 1. So so where is the source of this argument? The source of this argument is Beis Shammai Savri. Beis Shammai holds Asur L'Ishtamesh B'Shulchan Sheni. Beis Shammai holds you're not allowed to use a table that's a second degree of impurity. Gezerah Mishum Oichle Truma, because maybe Kayanim are going to come. They're going to want to eat. They're going to eat their truma on the table. And what happens if they eat their truma? Now is when we need to know this new law that a level 2 cannot make a level 3 impure when it comes to unconsecrated food. But when it comes to truma, it actually can make a level 3 of impurity. And that's what you need to know now, because Beis Shammai says, you know why I don't want you sitting at a level 2 table of impurity? Because a kayin might come and join you, and he's going to have his sandwich. That's truma. And what's going to happen with his sandwich? It'll actually be on the table. And even if there's no liquid, the table, that's a level 2 of impurity, will now cause the food to become a level 3. What do you mean? The food can't become a level, nothing can becomes a level 3. No, truma can become a level 3. Truma is holy, and there is a level 3 when it comes to truma. And so therefore we are concerned that a kayin, so Beis Shammai says you can't sit at a table that's a level 2, a recipient level 2, because what's going to happen is a kayin might end up messing up and causing the truma to become tameh. So you're not allowed to sit at a level 2 table. So therefore, all the tables that you sit at are not tameh. They have to be pure. If you're sitting at a table, it has to be a pure table. And therefore, he's not worried about the table. He's worried about the chair. The chair, the cushion is what he's worried about. That could be a level 2, and that could get wet, and the wetness will become a level 1. It'll make your hands tameh, and therefore you would be eating without washing your hands. That's Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel Sabri. Beis Hillel says, I'm not worried about that. You are allowed to use a table that is a level 2, shulchan sheni, the table that's a level 2 recipient of tumah. Why? He says, truma's reason him. People who eat truma, which means either kayanim, or it means people who eat mundane food on a holy level of truma. But it basically means the truma eaters are zrizenhein. They are very careful, extra careful to, they would make sure not to eat truma on a table that might be a level 2 of tumah. And therefore, I'm not worried about that. Beis Shammai says, no, we are worried about that. So that's what the argument starts with. If you're not worried about a table, so Beis Hillel says you can sit on a table that's possibly impure. Now, if the table is possibly impure, Beis Shammai is worried that the liquid in the towel, if you put it on the table, it might cause food to become impure on the table. But for some reason, he's not worried about what you're sitting on, that the liquid will become impure from the cushion that you're sitting on. He says, therefore, put the napkin on the cushion. Don't put it on the table. Now that does sound a little surprising. He's worried about the food on the table becoming impure. Why isn't he worried about Beis Shammai's issue about the cushion? That the cushion might be impure, it'll make the liquid in the thing impure, and then that will cause your hands to become impure. It would seem like he should be worried about both. I would say get a new napkin. But Beis Hillel is not worried about that. Why not? So the Gemara says davar acher, and there are two ways of learning this davar acher. One way of learning it is it's sort of asking this question. Davar acher, it says ein netilas yodayim lechulen min haTorah. Another point, and the first way I'm going to learn this is not the same as the davar acher that we had in the previous Gemara. The previous Gemara said davar acher, I'm going to give you another explanation. Here, it's another point that needs to be made to explain the first explanation. This davar acher is not a new explanation like the previous Gemara's davar acher. This davar acher is another point that we should mention is that washing hands is not a biblical for chulin, for mundane purposes, for mundane food, for unconsecrated food, is not a biblical obligation. So that's what the Brisa continues and says. Now, what does this mean? So the Gemara explains this davar acher. The Gemara explains the Brisa, the Tosefta. So my davar acher, what is this davar acher? What is this? What are you coming to explain? What are you coming to add to? So the Gemara says, Hachi kamri lahu. This is what it means to say. Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel tells Beis Shammai. L'chi teimru. And if you're going to ask, Ma'ishna gabe yoichlin, why am I worried about food on the table? The chayshinon, that I am worried, and don't put your napkin on the table because the food might become impure. Umayshna gabe yodayim delay chayshinon. Why am I worried about why am I not worried about hands if you put the napkin on the cushion? So afilo hachi ha'adifa. So Beis Hillel says, you know why I'm more worried about this and not that? Because even that you have a good question, even so that you have this question that I should be worried also about the cushion. It's better to be worried about the table than for the cushion, because the ein netilas yadayim lechulen min haTorah, washing hands for unconsecrated food is not a biblical obligation. There's no source biblically. And therefore, mutav sheyatamu yodayim the less lahu ikar midarais. It's better to have this issue because there's no origin biblically for this type of thing. There's no tumah that goes on one's hands alone. There's no such thing that the hands become impure biblically. It's only a rabbinic thing that your hands become impure. It's actually in the Gemara Shabbos, it talks about it, that the hands become impure, but it's not a biblical law. There's no origin biblically either. It doesn't have an origin biblically. And al yatamu eichlin dislu ikar midaraisa, but don't allow your napkin that's wet to cause the food to become impure, because food has a biblical law of impurity biblically. So even though this, of course, would be rabbinic, but it has a origin biblically, and therefore I am more concerned about the table than I am the cushion. So that's one way of learning the Gemara, that the Gemara is asking specifically this question. And the other way of learning is you have to change the text in the Gemara. And according to a different text, it would be actually like another reason similar to the previous Gemara that Beis Hillel says another reason why he's worried. Why he's not worried about the hands becoming impure, because ein netilas yadayim lechulen min haTorah, so I don't have to worry about a cushion and so on. It would be an additional reason. Okay, so this ends the issue of Tumah and Tahara. So if any of you felt this was a little complicated or not so enjoyable, we have completed it. Have a wonderful